Look at that. Exactly. Music ending at the right time. Probably too early, a little bit. Welcome, everyone. Getting close to the end. It'll still take a few more weeks. Hopefully, be done in time for the new in-person class with Reverend Dan Klein at St. Paul's, which will begin. Um, Not sure when it'll begin. Maybe Madalena remembers when it'll begin, but soon for the period of Lent at the church. And we will be doing the stories, or some of the stories, I'm not sure all the stories of Elijah the prophet from the book of Kings, 1 Kings, end of 1 Kings, beginning of 2 Kings. That will hopefully allow me to keep some balance.
It will begin on February 26th.
Okay, so I'd like to think that maybe we can, well, we'll overlap a week or two probably. Um, okay. I think I'm going to, after saying that, I don't think I'm going to be able to do class next week. Um, I'm going to a Trua conference in Washington, D.C. And you know what? If they're done there at 12, then, I think, yes, I think I'll be able to do it. I'll go back to my hotel and do it when the conference is over. And I think I will skip the planned action, which I won't tell you about now because I don't know how much it is public, but it's not something I actually want to be part of. Happy that they're doing it, but I'm not something. So more on that when I get back. I'll give a report. We're saying goodbye to Les for a few weeks. Is that you going for a few weeks?
It's 2 weeks.
Oh, okay, great. All right then. We're in Proverbs 29. I gave the title "Wisdom Fit for a Man." In no way to alienate you, Rita Claire. You should feel welcome doing this, but the word man, ish, as in all ancient documents, means a person, because that's where the focus was on. Appears here, I don't know how many times, 8 or 9 times, 8, 10 times. In this section, I lit them up in bold. That kind of stood out. Now, is that a difference in content, a theme in content? No, not really, because, it could be that had I been looking, I would have found the ish word, the man word, in other sections, because it's just the way that you write wisdom literature. A person should, a person will, a person has, those kinds of things. But why don't we start off with this one? Les, why don't you read for us number 1?
One oft reproved may become stiff-necked, but then will be suddenly broken beyond repair. When the righteous become great, the people rejoice, but when the wicked dominate, the people groan. A man who loves wisdom brings joy to his father, but he who keeps company with prostitutes will lose his wealth.
Okay, so what are the things that stand out here to people? Well, an oft-reproved person is a little bit hard to get to from the Hebrew because the Hebrew is ish tochachot. And ish tochachot would usually mean a reproving man. Usually it's a person, and then if there's a noun, a plural noun afterwards, it's a person who does those kind of things. It's that kind of genitive form.
Right.
This does occur in certain cases. There's I think I found out there's well, there's a verse that says ish harami, the person of my boycotting, or not boycott, what's in a harem of taking an oath against, something like that. It's rare, but it's really the only way to understand it, that it is a person who is being reprimanded or reproved, not a person who's doing the reproving. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense at all. So
It makes sense to me that way, though.
In what way, Malka?
So a person who reproves another person often becomes stiff-necked because they're always so critical.
Mm. So
So
you're
that just hmm
understanding stiff neck in a particular way.
hmm
Yeah. So
and reprove. So I think a person who's always correcting other people and saying you're wrong for this and you should do this, I think that they become stiff-necked. They just get stuck in their ways and they're just so critical they can't see the positive in anything or anybody.
interesting. Interesting. Yeah. Although then you're going to have to explain how the second line is related to this, which is that suddenly the that person will be broken beyond repair.
Right. They're so critical. They're not, nobody pays attention to their criticism because they're always so critical that they don't have anything positive to say. So people just you say, that's just he's being or she's being her regular self.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, fair. Might one also translate stiff-necked into jaded? That's
Mm,
going a little bit different direction than you were going. One who's constantly reproving other people becomes jaded and
mm,
insensitive, perhaps. Or maybe
right.
that's not the way to use
But
jaded. Oh,
right.
interesting. Very interesting. Not the way Fox went. And of course, I didn't check lots of other commentaries. But that's good. 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 I like that. All right.
They also always think that they are always right. Everyone else is wrong.
Hmm. Right. I just heard. I took a walk and regular coffee place wasn't open yet, so I went to coffee, where they have the garden outside, looking in group of men sitting around talking about. One was talking about a church that he belongs to, which is not in our area, and it must be an Episcopal church, just judging from the fact that there were the way the talk went and the pride flag is flying at the church, and is that the person who's there now, the rector who's there now, and he used the word rector, which either means Episcopal or Catholic, and because of the context, it wasn't Catholic. And it's in another place in Southern California. And he said, the rector now is doing a great job of including people after two very difficult rectors. He says the first guy's name was no, never mind. I'm not. He had a nickname. I don't want to say this in case it's out, but he had a nickname that had people scared of him, and because he would call people out from the pulpit, tell them what they were doing wrong, like parents of children that were making noise, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, you can become broken. You can be discontinued. All right, not so relevant. I realize. So moving on, it's a great thing when there's lots of righteous people. It's a happy society, says the author here, or the wisdom tradition. And yet, when wicked are dominating, people are in pain. Now, there's a lot in this week's chapter to compare to contemporary times here in the United States, or in Israel for that matter. And what's of course, what's true here is throughout human history is that, yeah, that's one person's, and what one person feels is wicked, another person is rejoicing. It's there. While this presents kind of an objective truth here, I think we all know from looking around the United States in recent years, objective truth is very hard. It's clear to us, of course, but you just hear so many different ways of looking at the same issue once you change the station, change the channel. And so it's not so easy to say when righteous are in power, then everybody's happy. Well, when certain people who I consider to be righteous relative to politicians were in power, half of this country was up in arms because the man was black, for instance. It's oversimplifying it, of course. And then others come and people are groaning. Many of us know people who are groaning now, but there's other people who are rejoicing. So that's the tricky thing here. How do you find this is all human nature, but it's not necessarily an objective way of looking at society in general. I guess I don't know. Okay, and then this last section. It seems to be talking about a young man who's still living with his father, at his parents' home, and if that young man is a student getting good grades, I'm paraphrasing, that he will bring joy to his father. But if he hangs out with prostitutes, and the term here is an interesting term, ro'eh zonot. Ro'eh with an ayin is a shepherd. He's a shepherd of prostitutes. Although also it's hanging out with. It could easily be hanging out with. Could also be a pimp. My first reaction was a guy who has a what have I heard in TV and movies? And they say this about Jeffrey Epstein as well. Not a herd of, not a harem, what?
Stable?
Yes,
Stable.
stable. Yeah, that's the association. Somebody has a stable. Horrible things to say, and I apologize, but a stable of women, right? That's what ro'eh, because of stable having to do with livestock, and yes, it's objectification. It's horrible stuff. But that's the first association I got here. Ro'eh zonot. Fox makes an interesting comment in that to go to a prostitute is in biblical law is not a forbidden thing. It's a place, it's not respectable. It's not the best way to live your life, but it's not a forbidden thing. And again, I say this with the background of the last 24 hours and somebody, I made the mistake, not the mistake, it's good to read. Somebody sent me a piece from the Daily, not the Daily Mirror, the Daily other thing from UK, the Daily Mail, which kind of spreads out, internationalizes the Jeffrey Epstein thing more than I had been aware of. Anyway, okay. But what Fox points out here is that the reason the father is not so happy that his son is going and hanging out with the prostitutes, because if he's keeping bad company, it's because he's wasting money, spending money, and his father's money. That's kind of the context that Fox sees this in. Comments, questions? Gornish? Okay, you're quite stable today. Yes, Rita Claire.
I have a question. In some Christian religions, it would be very, very sinful to go to a prostitute or even have sex without being married. So how does God feel, would you say, with this statement?
Are you asking me
as Judaism is concerned?
Are you asking me as an expert at God's feelings, on God's
No,
feelings?
no. Let me reword that. How does Judaism feel, or say how God would feel about this?
So Judaism doesn't talk as much, not liberal Judaism, certainly doesn't talk about how God feels. Judaism talks about how you should act your life, and yes, when you boil it down, that is assumed to be God's will. But if we look at biblical literature as how God feels about prostitutes, we have a few examples of women, either a professional prostitute like Rachav, the prostitute in the walls of Jericho, or Tamar, dressing up as somebody else and seducing her father, where biblical literature does not have a big problem with prostitutes. The problem in biblical literature and biblical law was with the Kedeshot, the Kedeshim and the Kedeshot, who were temple prostitutes. Now, things have changed since I was in university, and I seem to see now in research that it's not the same. But when I was growing up, when I was younger, biblical studies, a zonah was a woman who sold her body. That was how she made a living with having sex. And a Kedeshah and a Kadesh, both male and female, were those that were in the service of the temple as part of cultic prostitution. Prostitution may not be the right word, but cultic sex. And that had to do with the fertility cult. It could be that a lot of that was a lot of presumptions were made when in those studies from certain ancient Near Eastern texts. We've talked many times. We go back to the beginning of the source. Many of you have read the source, not Leon Uris, James Michener, and he has a scene, about Canaanite, the fertility rites, that if you had sexual acts in the temple itself that was going to guarantee the fertility of the land and the connection between fertility of a person, of a human being. And so we have, so that's it. Now, as far as there's laws about prostitutes. There's laws about it's a given that prostitution is part of society. I'm not talking about now. I'm talking about what one should do, but in biblical and rabbinic literature as well. There's this custom in Babylonia for having a wife, a temporary wife, which exists in different cultures around the world. Temporary wives that you can have sex with, but it's not meant to last. It's not a regular marriage. Our Judaism that most of us studied growing up did not emphasize those kinds of things, because our mores and our ethics were taken, and also not just because it's American, we're part of American society, but also from Orthodox Judaism did not approve. In no way does Orthodox Judaism approve of prostitution. Yet in biblical and halachic literature, it's not nearly as bad as many other things that people do. Yeah, now all this is given, Rita Claire, as a man. A man can satisfy his sexual needs in different ways. A woman, though, cannot. A woman is that's found. A woman is either the daughter, the pure daughter, virgin daughter of her father, and if she becomes an unvirgin under her father's husband, then that's a problem to get her married. That's not, it's not impossible. I'm sure it happened all the time, but and then once she's married, she has no freedom to have sexual contact with any other man other than her husband. A man, biblically speaking, even though it was pared back in Talmudic literature, a man, theoretically speaking, as I think you know, could have multiple wives. Yeah, Les.
Well, that was sort of my question, is when did it, I mean, clearly in Genesis, having multiple wives is clearly okay. What's the timing of sort of the change of opinion or literature or scripture in terms of having more than one wife?
Already in the Talmud, I'm not an expert on this, but I think there's a book by Feldman that came out already, I'm guessing in the 70s, if not the 60s, about marital lives and things like that. I think that in the Talmud already, it's frowned upon. In the Talmud, for instance, I can think of one particular issue that comes up in modern day Israel in the 80s or the 90s, maybe in the 90s, maybe beyond that, where if a man is unable to divorce his wife, if she refuses the divorce or unable to see it through, men can instigate, but they can't complete it without the woman somehow agreeing. If a woman refuses to divorce, the Beit Din, that's taken out of the man's own, decision-making process, the court, rabbinic court, can give him permission to marry another woman. And this actually happened in the 90s, I believe, in Beersheba, in the rabbinical court in Beersheba. The first wife was mentally ill and was institutionalized, and because of that, she couldn't be part of the divorce process. So the court, it was highly publicized, of course, because people hated that this happened. Court allowed for this man to have technically two wives. Now in Yemen, so this is, Yemenite Jews were religiously observant till they got to Israel. In Yemen, men had two wives. It wasn't uncommon, and they came to the state of Israel, and they were allowed to have those two wives once they got there. It was grandfather clause, whatever. But once they're there, they couldn't. In modern day state of Israel, because family law is dictated not just by the state, but also by the top religious body of any religion, and that includes denominations in Christianity. I met over the years Bedouin men who have two wives. So yeah, I know families that in Yemenite families that had two mothers. Yes, Malka.
Just wondering if halakha could give permission to a man whose wife, because of her mental instability, couldn't grant a divorce. Why couldn't they do the same for the Agur?
Because, so I would say a modern day halakha, if the halakha was important, there may be some people who have worked on that, feminists who have worked on that particular topic. I have a different approach, but it's clear why that happened. It happened because once upon a time, there was nothing wrong with having two wives. And even though it may have been frowned upon and halakha, normative halakha moved away from that, the Ikar halacha, that is the basic principles from the Torah going forward, were that a man could always have more than one wife. So that's why it was possible from a social point of view, from a halachic point of view. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyway, so back to the Ro'ez Zonot, the one who's the shepherd of prostitutes, keeps the company of prostitutes. Okay. Anything? So let's take a look at Les. Why don't you read from Eruvin? And this is a way of totally taking that text of shepherding prostitutes out of its context into a new context, which is far more important and noteworthy from a rabbinic point of view. Go ahead.
Didn't Rabbi Ahab bar Anina say, what is the meaning of that which is written? But he who keeps company with prostitutes, zonot, wastes his fortune. It alludes to the following. Anyone who says this teaching is pleasant, zonoah, but this is not pleasant, loses the fortune of Torah.
Talking about, totally play on words, right? Zonah is a prostitute. Zo, this, na'ah, this is pleasant. Zo na'ah, talking about a particular Torah, a Dvar Torah, a sermon that somebody gave, a halachic novel idea that somebody gave. Somebody sitting in the Beit Midrash says, yafeh mod, like I said before to Malka, right? I gave a judgment, a personal judgment on her interpretation, saying, oh, that's a nice one. So according to Rabbi Acha bar Chanina, in this tradition, he says, no, you don't do that. You don't do that with Torah. Presumably because it's all na'ah, it's all pleasant, it's all good. What the first thing that jumped in my mind here was, I remember, especially my good friend Yair Zakovich, who I mention almost every week, multiple times perhaps, my teacher, professor, very, very good friend. He did not have a lot of patience for the nudniks, right, the nudges that came to class. And he didn't have so much patience for non-Bible department students that came to the class for various reasons, because it was listed together with women's studies or whatever it was. And I remember somebody who wasn't from the regular group in graduate school, maybe. Maybe it was already, in undergraduate. But somebody came in and said something about one of the characters I think it was about Elijah characters. Well, that's very nice. That's wonderful. I really like the way that the character is. Identifying with the character. And Zakowicz stops everything. He says, I'm not a big fan of us judging the biblical text whether we like it or not. We want to understand the text. What do we learn from it? Do we like it or not like it? Yair would have a hard time with what all of us rabbis and pastors, especially in America, but not only in Israel as well, when people read the text and people will say, I have a problem with that, or I really like that. Zakowicz used to say, I'm not really interested in what you like or what you don't like. This is not about you. This is about the text itself. This is an academic framework. And now, of course, that changes once you get to a congregation, right? Or once you get to a group like we're doing now, or once you even get to two people studying on their own. Anyway, all teaching is pleasant. That's the moral of the story. Okay. But if some of you want to understand that that's the only meaning, and therefore you can hang out with prostitutes and waste your money, who am I to say no? Okay. All right. Don't quote me on that. I guess I am quoted. You're
not only being quoted, you're being recorded.
I know. We may have to take this down, Madeline. Okay. All right, then. Anything else on this short section?
Should I stop the Facebook Live?
No. It was kind of a joke. I said something.
Oh, okay.
As I always do, I said some things I should not say. So, okay. All right. Yeah. Number 4, Dan, would you read, please?
By justice, a king sustains the land, but the fraudulent man tears it down. A man who flatters his fellow spreads a net for his feet. An evil man's offenses are a trap for himself, but the righteous person sings out joyously. The righteous are concerned with the cause of the wretched. The wicked cannot understand such concern.
Okay. Mm-hmm. By the way, the breakdown today was because I just wanted to have bite-sized chunks. There's no,
Mm.
you know, I kind of looked, when a section started more about leader, this section is a lot about leadership, but not only. So what do we have to say about this, if anything?
Mm. I think it was interesting that they in the verses, the fourth couplet, that by justice a king sustains the land, but a fraudulent man tears it down. I thought it was interesting, but they didn't say, but a fraudulent king tears it down. So it seems to me that a person's in power can sustain the land, but a whole lot of fraudulent, everyday, ordinary people tear it down.
Yeah. So, okay. So funny you say that, Rabbi Malka, because some people, a problematic word, a challenging word here is the second word in the Hebrew of the second verse, ish trumot.
Out.
So
Mm-hmm.
literally, a truma, it comes
Mm-hmm.
from the verb resh vav mem, to lift up.
Right.
A truma is something that's been lifted up to the
Right.
temple, to the in the sanctuary, and we use the word today, donation or contribution. A truma or a torem is a contributor or a donor. So that has to do with lifting something up, but it was lifting something up to the altar, or to the priest who was above you, lifting your gift up. Some people here, and that doesn't make sense. What does that mean? A man, a donor, ish trumot, or either way, does that mean a person who gives I don't think so, right? Does it mean a person who receives things is ruining? But how's that connected to the first part? So one way to deal with that is not to read trumot, but without the vav, in the middle is ish tarmit, from a different word, tarmit from mirma. Uh, um, yeah. But back to what you said, there are some, like Rav Sadia Gaon, that is already 1,200 years ago, or Crenshaw, who's a common, I think that probably 70s or 80s, his commentary. They go in a different direction. They say each trumot is somebody who, a truma is also, they see, is taxes. So it's one who overtaxes the people. Each trumot, he's known for taxing the people. Another way to go is one who is known for accepting gifts in his leadership position. Shochad, right? Bribery. So Rabbi Mako, that kind of goes in your direction of it goes against you. And it says, no, we're still talking about a leader here. Yeah. Yeah. So Melech and Ish are parallel to each other. King and. But also, if you're from, on the other hand, like you wanted to say, if this comes from the royal palace, this section especially, which I mentioned a few weeks ago, some scholars think that this whole section comes from, is a handbook for rulers, then maybe that is the way. In other words, you have to sustain the land by king, but you should know there's people out there that are still going to mess it up. Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, the third couplet, verse 6. Okay, 4, 5, and 7. They pair nicely. I don't understand the juxtaposition within 6.
Yeah, I don't know if I have an answer for that. Well, 4 and 5, verses 5 and 6 connect in that they both talk about a trap. So it could be somebody came to bring these things together. So let's go 4, 6, and 7 together, but 4, 5, and 7 together, but 6 was connected to 5. It's hard. It's hard to speculate. I mean, we could speculate. Not hard to speculate. It's hard to really know.
Is spreading a net for his feet negative or positive?
It's negative. It's a strange term. He has trouble getting out of it as well. But he says it's like a net over a hole. It's a kind of a trap. When you camouflage a hole with you put a net over and then put dirt on top of it and leaves on top of it. If I understood quickly, that's how he understands that. Yeah. You think you're flattering your fellow. You think you are gaining favor with him. You think you're making friends that way, but you're setting yourself up for failure afterwards. That's how I think I understand it. So then we have these last two lines. I tried a different approach, by the way, because I wanted each to be in bold. I underlined. I know often you see, if anybody reads the Hebrew, you see that the things in bold that I want to talk about. Instead, I underlined the verses that I wanted to talk about, that I was bringing commentary. So in the first box, for instance, Ro'ez Zonot is underlined. So that was the Babylonian Talmud was about that. In this one, Trumot, because I wanted to talk about Tarmit, Machlik. I didn't bring it up now, but I have before. Gever Machlik, Arehu, a man who flatters his fellow. Machlik literally means to smooth over. And I've mentioned before the Dorshea Chalakot, those who speak, their speeches are smooth, their words are the bad guys in the Qumran, the language of the Qumran people, the Dead Sea Scrolls. The smooth talking lawyers, smooth operators. So now these two lines at the end, first of all, the way it sounds like it's very the assonance, right? Yodea tzaddik din dalim, a righteous person, he knows the cause of the wretched, the justice of the wretched, the laws of the wretched. Hard to know exactly, and whatever it is, though, wicked, they don't understand that, right? So the righteous people understand, wicked, they just don't know. And that I wanted to think something of. I wanted to talk about maybe how this relates to our work in Orah Midbar. I see myself in my rabbinate. And then I looked in Fox. Sorry, we've got a little noise coming from someplace. Somebody have radio. Let's try this. Do we have any noise left? Okay. All right. So I went to Fox's. I don't think I've done this until now. I can't remember that I have ever quoted Fox. I tell you what Fox says. That's Fox is the Anchor Bible with 2 volumes on Proverbs that I've been using since the beginning of this course. Great, and relatively new. So I went ahead and I quoted this. I thought this was worthwhile, and I can remember not doing this so much in my life. I always have source sheets, right? You folks have known me for 11 years, right? I always have source sheets. And source sheets, for my mind, are biblical, rabbinic, medieval, maybe a modern commentator or something, but rarely a critical commentary of the Bible. And I remember doing this once before, where Jacob Milgram wrote a piece about the word dror, which means freedom. It's a Semitic word from other places. It's what the kings would do after they would alight to the throne, ascend to the throne. They would set all slaves free, and how he and we have that law in Leviticus as well, something similar to that in the Jubilee year, and then he writes this paragraph about the civil rights movement in the United States and how he felt, and that was very un-Zakovich of him, right? He brought his own world reality into the text, into his Anchor Bible commentary. So this felt like the same thing here. Dan, if you would read from Fox Proverbs, this is on, I forgot what page, but if anybody wants to look it up, I'll give you the page.
The righteous man knows the rights of the lowly, the wicked man does not have knowledge. Righteousness demands that one actively seek to know the rights of the poor. This proverb gives insight into the ethics of Proverbs, which knowledge is a perquisite of morality. Doing the right thing requires knowing the right thing, but being able to know this requires the right moral disposition to start with. But the wicked man bears the responsibility for his wickedness, just as the righteous man gains credit for his righteousness. The wicked man's ignorance is willful because he wills what is evil.
I don't know about you guys, but I found it pretty relevant. Our situation, I think of why it's important for us to know the rights of immigrants, of migrants. It's important for us to know the rights of people who are threatened in medical situations. It's really important for us to know, even though it doesn't affect us. It doesn't affect me. I don't carry my passport with me. I'm not afraid. But it's, it just feels like you got to go out there. You have to learn. You've got to learn about this, and that you need before you can have a moral lifestyle. You got to know stuff. You cannot remain unknowledgeable, and that's the challenge, because the more that we feel in the mode of communication in the last few decades, we feel that in order for us to know stuff, we need to look at media more. And of course, the media has its own dynamic in which who's doing the speaking. That's why it's really important for me to read every day, to read something. And it's also important for me from a form message in the format for me to read a book with pages. Now, I know you could read it on Kindle. I know there's a lot of really good stuff online. It's not that I know, but something in the form for me, and there's a personal thing, that with the book and the intake of information, that I don't feel ever that I am being hit upon, not the books that I read, and yelled at. And when I did read something once and I felt I was being yelled at, I stopped reading that person. It was Yeshayahu Leibovich, I remember. Yeshayahu Leibovich, a really important Israeli philosopher. Who probably died, I don't know, probably in the 80s, 90s. No, 90s, odds. I don't know. Anyway, somebody said, well, how come you don't read, you with your ideology should be reading Leibovich. I said, I tried to read Leibovich. I felt like he was yelling at me. So I think a lot of websites yell at us, not just social media. There's a lot of yelling at us, but in general, a lot of TV is yelling at us in different ways, not necessarily raising our voices. So you got to know stuff. So and that's the thing. How do we go out? We can't say, well, I'm not reading, I'm not listening. I can't say I'm not listening to the news anymore. I'm not. I do take it easy. I do step back, but how can I as a good citizen of the country, of the world, of Palm Springs, be out there helping others if I don't know what's going on, if I don't know their rights as well? So this piece obviously resonated with me. Eileen, did you want to say something?
No, I was just going to comment on wicked man's ignorance. It seems like it's an intentionality of keeping a blind eye.
Mm-hmm.
Very intentional.
Yeah, that's what he's saying. That's what Fox is saying. Right. So it's not that the wicked cannot understand such concern because there's something wrong with their brains. It's because they have agency. They've chosen not to get involved in that. And so, and just like not speaking out on something is also a position.
Do you think that wicked people know they're wicked? I mean, if you would ask certain people if they're wicked, they would certainly say no.
Well, not in James Bond. I've been watching James Bond movies lately because they all came to Netflix. Like at one time there was a James Bond dump on Netflix, and the bad guys, the Spectre guys, no, they know they're wicked. They like it's like yeah, that. So is that true though? Do most people?
I mean, if we think about political situation today, do you think the ones that are wicked really understand that they're wicked? No, I wouldn't say that they do. That they feel justified for the most part in whatever they do. They think that they're the righteous ones, and maybe you and I and other people are the wicked ones for.
Right. To my point beforehand, yes. But so the question, are there those that are politically influential today and active that know that they're, or do they just have a different sense? Like I was saying before,
Right.
They have a different sense. I don't know. Megan, what do you think about this as a knower, understander of people? You don't have to answer. I'm putting you on the spot, but you don't have to answer.
I have worked with people. Being in Raleigh, North Carolina for a while, there are a lot of mob families that escaped New York. And they know, but it's a culture. That's the only one I've been. And then politically right now, I don't think, I can't imagine they think they're wicked. They just think they're making money, which
Right.
to me is wicked. And what they do is horrendous. But I think some people just don't have that that part of their brain that tells them, this is really wrong and you don't do it. They just don't have it. I don't know.
So So, what we would call a sociopath?
Yeah, yeah. A sociopath, they're not one that, well, they are going around killing people. But just without that consciousness of right or wrong that say I would have. So I don't know. I'm still back on the prostitutes. I wanted to say from my profession, I've worked with people, women who are prostitutes nowadays called escorts, and it's always baffled me why it's the women who are breaking the law, and not all the men who they're making money from. And the ones I work with, of course, are miserable, or they wouldn't be coming to me. But so that was a question I had
Yeah.
before, but I decided not to even enter that territory.
It's good you ask. In Sweden, the punishments are on the men, not on the women.
Good.
I don't know if it's completely, I don't know in all cases, but I know that it's that was one of the things I discovered when I was there, talking about women's rights issues, and remember talking, and often speaking from an Israeli or an American viewpoint from the Bima. I had to give like proper sermons there all the time. So often people would say, you don't understand. Sweden's a different place. For instance, here, prostitutes, it's the Johns, I think you call them, the Johns who are punished for this. They're the ones who get fined or go to jail, whatever it is.
Our Puritan.
Yeah.
So
I mean, you do understand. You don't like it, but you do understand how it came to be that, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Once a woman is made into merchandise, the man is not the problem. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Hi.
Shall we go? Yes, go ahead, Chuck.
You were taking us back a few minutes earlier. You were speaking about the importance of being informed, which is quite correct. But today, there's this whole notion of us getting disinformation. Easy enough with current events where someone says, "Oh yeah, that didn't happen," but it did happen. But for somebody having a phone recording of it, it did happen, but somebody is pronouncing on the wavelengths, no, that didn't happen. Or AI can just make up other information.
Yeah.
It really is difficult to sort out true information and disinformation or false information. I don't know the answer. I know the problem.
So I'll give you one answer. I think a lot about what you're asking about, Chuck, or what you're bringing up. As you know, I still consider myself an educator. With you folks, I'm an educator, but as somebody who was involved in youth education for many years, for decades, not just raising our own children. How do you cultivate the ability to discern truth from nonsense or bullshit or lies or whatever, however they are, and a lot of this has to do with in-person contact. Is right when I got here, so this is 10 years ago, I found a book quoted, or I bought a book, and I spoke about it on, I think probably my first Rosh Hashanah, about how, and that this is a decade ago, the studies that have been done, not just in the United States, but predominantly here, on how the lack of empathy, the dearth of empathy amongst children and young people, because of their lack of personal, body-to-body, in-person kind of stuff. And this, of course, became even worse with the pandemic, and even persists in many ways. I mean, this is an example of it. Many of us, we think we know each other. We do to a certain degree after spending so much time online together, but some of us have never met each other in person. We've never felt what it's like. There's so much we learn, understand, feel, hear from people when we're meeting in person. So I think, Chuck, that's part of it. How are joining more frameworks and groups, expanding people of coming together, and coming together, not in opposition necessarily, not in a fight, not in a. So that it's a small thing, but I think to me that's yeah, because you have checks on your system. It's people who live alone who don't see any other people not that, many people who live alone, and they don't have ongoing meaningful contact with others. Their mind goes in all sorts of places because their contact, what they think is their meaningful contact, is this and the screen. So the more people we have around us, there's checks and balances. We check them, they check us, and a lot of this is just such innuendo. It's some of it you can't spell out in words. A lot of it is feelings. I don't know. Okay.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I don't know if this is related, maybe it's a little tangential, but many years ago, I think 10 or 11 years ago, somebody was talking to me about a book he had read called The Big Sort. I don't know if anybody here has heard of that book, but it was called The Big Sort. And it was about the fact that in the United States, people were basically relocating to other areas of the country where all the people around them would be of the same political view or outlook as they. And that the country was kind of being sorted by this. And this was a book, and it seems as now we talk about red states and blue states and stuff like this, and it seems as though it was true. And this was it's been going on for a long time, I think.
Mm-hmm.
A very long time. Anyway.
And it's not just geographic. It's not tangential. I don't think it's so at all. It's not just geographical moving place to place. It's belonging. You belong to the synagogue, the group, the club, whatever it might be. You belong to like-minded people, and there is good. There's support in that. But if we are to move ahead with what I was talking about, I think it's necessary to be in touch with people we don't agree with as well. But to have a
maybe that's why liberalism tends to persist in places where there are a multitude of cultures like New York, California, the Northeast, because you get to interact with a lot of different cultural backgrounds versus, say, other places in some southern states where it's monolithic.
That could be, yeah. Okay. All right, let's see if we can move ahead here and try to finish. Manny, would you read for us from verse 8?
Scoffers inflame a city, but the wise allay anger. When someone who is wise enters into litigation with a fool, there is ranting and ridicule, but no satisfaction. Those who are bloodthirsty detest the blameless, but the upright seek them out. A duller gives full vent to rage, but a wise person calms it down. A ruler who listens to lies, all his ministers will be wicked. The poor and the fraudulent meet. God gives luster to the eyes of both. A king who judges the wretched honestly, his throne will be established forever.
Okay. Who's going first?
Verse in 10, is there a reason in the Hebrew, is it in 10? Yeah. Why there's a hyphen there? And Anshe Damim, the next word, is there a reason there's a hyphen after the
Oh, I'm not an expert at the hyphens and the stuff and the grammar stuff. I don't know a lot about that, tell you the truth. I can tell you what the term means, yisneu tam, from the word sin'ah.
Haters.
They hate the innocent, they hate the blameless. But why what are the rules for having the hyphen and not hyphen? I don't know. Yeah, you see it everywhere.
Or is that really a makef in Hebrew? But it's up high. That's why I just wanted to join the two words together.
No, in this font, that's how they join it. But you see that I think you see it in, I think it's part of the Nikud, It's
Mm.
not in this plain scribal text. But I don't know. I don't really know. Sorry.
David,
Yeah.
I don't quite understand the couplet of number 13.
Yeah. So that the challenge there is, what does that second line mean, right? So if we
Mm.
get this right, you get, as we've been talking about, in heterogeneous cities, and or like what Malka was saying. So Rash v'ish techachim nifkashu, a person who's a ish techachim, fraudulent. It could also mean a troublemaker, perhaps. They meet. All that is fine. So you've got two opposites. You have the poor person, and maybe the successful, nasty person. you know, they meet. But what the author of Proverbs is as making sure that we know is that both of them, I lost my place. Both of them, right? Shnehem, God has filled their eyes with light. Now, that doesn't mean enlightenment. That probably means that, this is how I understand it. I had a friend in Israel years ago, academic years, who used to say, an older guy who was a teacher, kind of a know-it-all guy, and we were talking something about us and the other guys, whoever the other guys were, who were our enemies or whatever. And he says, remember, I think he called, because I was a rabbinical student, remember, my young rabbi, the sun shines on that guy as well. The sun shines on both of us. Do people say that?
The sun shines on the just and the unjust alike.
Yeah, sunshine. To me, that's what the Me'ir Einayim is. In other words, both of those people, whether they're fortunate in life, either because they've snuck, they've figured it out, they've manipulated the decision, or they're poor, and that's the thing. Both of them, their lives, that's how Fox goes. Their lives are derived from God.
Mm.
Hmm.
Which is a little bit revolutionary in ancient Near East, because we're not talking about human rights the way we understand them. That every person is created in God's image. That thing. No, poor people were treated like cattle, like possessions. And so I guess in that way it's a rather progressive statement. Not surprising of everything else we've seen about relationship between rich and poor, and righteous and evil. Okay. Anything else? Okay, let's go on to the section from Shmot, who was reading. Manny? This, we can read the second paragraph. We can go down to another matter. We don't need the first paragraph.
Number 15.
No, before 15, the second paragraph of Midrash Shmot Rabbah.
Second paragraph. Okay. Another matter. Moses implored. That is what is written. Cynical men will agitate a city. This is Israel, who fanned the flames of fury in the world with the calf after they crafted. As Rabbi Asi said, there is no generation that does not take an ounce from the act of the calf, and wise men will assuage wrath. This is Moses, who suppressed the fury of the Holy One, blessed be he, with the favorable plea that he pleaded on behalf of Israel. That is, Moses implored.
Okay, the context of this midrash is on those words Moses implored God not to destroy the people after the golden calf. The interest here, and the reason I brought both paragraphs, but we'll skip over the first paragraph, is the usage of Proverbs in building up Moses' character, filling in gaps from the narrative the way that we have it in Exodus. In this case, going back to that verse that we in 29:8 that we began with, that scoffers inflame a city. Oh, the scoffers here are the Israelites, the people of Israel. The city are the Israelite people who had just been taken out of Egypt, or standing at the foot of Mount Sinai. They just gotten the Ten Commandments. They saw God's presence in this world, and yet they did what they did. But the wise, in this case, that means Moses, will come and help them out. Just another example, as we've seen many, many times, of a biblical character playing out the words of Proverbs. Okay. Megan, you want to read 15 for us?
Rod and reproof produce wisdom, but a youth out of control is a disgrace to his mother. When the wicked increase, offenses increase, but the righteous will see their downfall. Discipline your son, and he will give you peace. He will gratify you with dainties. Oh, that'd be nice.
And we've actually had that. The gratifying with dainties is we've had it once or twice, maybe even in Proverbs beforehand. And of course, the age-old thing of the bad stuff is on the woman. Right? Look at what your son has done now. Excuse me, dear. He's our son, right? But I don't think there's anything terribly controversial or new here, unless somebody wants to bring something up. Okay, so Megan,
it's an interesting juxtaposition of 15 about reproving, and then at the very beginning in verse 1, one oft reproved may become stiff-necked.
Yeah. So we have a lot of the reproving though throughout Proverbs, right? The rod, the discipline, and I think that the focus here, Les, is on disciplining the children while they're at home to make sure they come out to be good, menschlach afterwards. And whereas the first verse here is talking in theoretical about somebody out there in society who's often just yelling and standing on the street corner yelling at everybody and screaming, lock them up or whatever. Okay. All right. So Megan, why don't you go on for us, 18.
For lack of vision, a people lose restraint, but happy is he who heeds instruction. A slave cannot be disciplined by words. Though he may comprehend, he does not respond. If you see a man hasty in speech, there is more hope for a fool than for him. A slave pampered from youth. For him, a slave.
It could be. 21. That's the 21 should be before a slave pampered.
Okay, a slave pampered from youth will come to a bad end. An angry man provokes a quarrel. A hothead commits many offenses. Pride of mortals will bring humiliation, but one who is humble will obtain honor. He who shares with a thief is his own enemy. He who hears the imprecation and does not tell. A person's fears become a trap, but one who trusts in God shall be safeguarded. Many seek audience with a ruler, but it is from God that a wronged party gets justice. The unjust man is an abomination to the righteous, but one whose way is straight is an abomination to the wicked.
Yeah, that's an interesting usage flip of abomination, right?
Yeah.
Nothing I would say, yeah. Any issues that come out? I mean, again, kind of, we're hearing a lot of the same stuff over and over again. So those words, a slave pampered from youth. Translated also one who indulges his servant from youth. What does that mean? Does it mean the youth of the slave? Does it mean the youth of the person? Whatever it is, it'll come to a bad end. And we can finish today on how the rabbis see this playing out. At the bottom, Midrash Bereshit Rabbah. Rabbi Avin said, anyone who indulges his evil inclination in his youth, it will ultimately become his master in his old age. What is the source for this? The verse, one who indulges his servant from youth will have him ultimately become his master. Right? It's kind of a very different take on the text that we have. And talking about struggles between people in Proverbs become in later rabbinic literature, and certainly in further rabbinic literature, the struggles that one has with oneself in character development. In other words, discipline yourself when you're young. Otherwise, you won't get out of it. You'll never grow out of those things. Comments or questions? Yes, Klaus.
Got to unmute. There seems to be a sort of a feeling in the background here that if you're the master, you have to exert yourself all the time. You shouldn't be nice to your slave. You shouldn't be nice to other people, because if you are, then they're going to take you over. Is that the real intent of this passage, that that you should be tough and take it out on your people?
Yeah, so I know that doesn't sound so good. Another word, instead of being nice, is the word you used. The word that's in the translation here is pampered or indulged. And so maybe one might say overly nice. What's clear from this, Klaus, is that the caste system needs to be preserved.
Yeah.
The caste, whether it's official or unofficial, you need to know. Now, what the rabbis do is they take this out, they say, this is not talking about people, right? Just look at yourself, young man. The more that you indulge in the pleasures and you drink until late at night and you overeat, whatever, you're going to have a hard time reining yourself in when it's time to go to school, when it's time to go to work, when it's time to have children. I think that's kind of, now, is that the simple meaning of the text? No. I think all in all, it's about how you run your household, or if this is indeed part of a section which was directed towards rulers and political leaders, then you need to know you can't overindulge your people.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you can't be nice to them, but you can't be too nice.
Interesting. Thank you.
Right. You can clean the streets, but don't think about putting up street lights. Which reminds me, we'll end with this, my Bobby, of blessed memory. Sivia Lazar, my father's mother, was walking around my parents' house. So we're slowly relinquishing our experiences of having that as the family house. And we're walking around. This is the south of Ventura Boulevard in Sherman Oaks, right? And there's no sidewalks where we live. The lawns go to the street, and that's it. And we're walking around. And I said, Bobby, how come there's no sidewalks? How old was I? 5, 6? I don't know. How come there's no sidewalks? So she says, because the mayor's lazy. Simple as that. It's an easy way to see the world. The mayor's lazy. The mayor at the time was Sam Yorty, who actually lived in our neighborhood, and boy, did my father hate Sam Yorty. Okay. Leadership. Sidewalks. Friends, it's good to have you here. We will be studying next week together. I'll see you then.